The world stage has often been a place where American presidents represent the nation's values, diplomacy, and leadership. But with Donald Trump, those expectations have often been shattered, as his controversial actions and statements continue to humiliate the United States and alienate key allies. From reckless threats to humorous yet insulting remarks, Trump's behavior has been a far cry from the standard of diplomacy expected from the leader of the free world. In recent weeks, his actions have once again sparked outrage, not only within the United States, but also across the globe. In this video, we explore the latest incident where Trump's actions and words have embarrassed the United States, further tarnishing its image abroad. This time, his comments about annexing Canada, his continued attacks on international allies, and his baffling remarks about foreign policy have led many to question whether the former president understands the gravity of his words. As we delve into this latest episode, we'll look at how Trump has once again managed to humiliate himself on the world stage, offering little more than a spectacle of embarrassment that serves only to damage U.S. relationships with critical global partners. 1. Trump's annexation threats, a joke gone too far. One of the most shocking comments to come from Trump recently was during a meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. According to sources, Trump joked about annexing Canada and making Trudeau the governor of the newly added territory. While Trump tried to frame it as a lighthearted comment, the implications were far from funny. For many, this was a deeply offensive remark, especially coming from the leader of the United States, a country that prides itself on its democratic values and respect for sovereignty. Trump's comments were not just a slap in the face to Trudeau, but to the entire Canadian nation. For decades, the U.S. and Canada have been allies, sharing a long border, extensive trade relationships, and common values. The idea that the U.S. could annex its northern neighbor in jest is a clear violation of the respect expected between nations, and it plays into an authoritarian fantasy that many critics believe Trump has long held. The AI-generated image Trump later posted, which depicted him with a Canadian flag, further underscored his disregard for the nation he supposedly holds in high regard. Interestingly, the image was set in what appeared to be Switzerland or Italy, not Canada. This bizarre choice raised questions. Was he implying that he had conquered Switzerland for the benefit of Canada? The optics were not lost on observers who saw this as another example of Trump's tendency to trivialize international relations. Trump's defenders, however, attempted to dismiss the remarks as a mere joke. Fox News, a platform Trump often relies on for support, downplayed the incident, stating that Trump's comments were nothing more than offhand humor. But this rhetoric, which is often used to defend extreme or controversial statements, does little to mitigate the damage. If anything, it highlights the lack of seriousness with which Trump approaches global diplomacy, treating important international relationships as mere punchlines for his followers. 2. Humiliating remarks toward U.S. allies, a pattern of disrespect. Trump's behavior didn't end with his comments about Canada. Over the past few years, he has repeatedly insulted and disrespected U.S. allies, further alienating the nations that have long been the cornerstone of American foreign policy. Whether it's threatening tariffs on Canada and Mexico, mocking France, or downplaying the importance of international alliances, Trump's rhetoric and actions have been a constant source of embarrassment. At the core of Trump's attacks on U.S. allies is his obsession with America First, a slogan that often translates into reckless policies that harm the very relationships that have helped secure America's global position. His threats to impose tariffs on Canada, a country that is one of America's largest trading partners, are a prime example of this. Trump's comments regarding tariffs were not only economically damaging but also diplomatically reckless, suggesting that the U.S. should sever ties with Canada and other key nations over economic disagreements. Furthermore, Trump's remarks about France, Switzerland, and other European nations show his total lack of understanding about international diplomacy. His decision to make crude comments about France's leadership, particularly in the wake of his unrelenting attacks on European Union policies, has alienated a critical ally in the fight against global challenges such as climate change, terrorism, and economic inequality. Trump's offhand comments about U.S. allies also extended to Mexico, where his infamous remarks about the Mexican government and people continue to resonate. His constant disparaging of Mexican immigrants and leaders has contributed to a toxic environment where collaboration on issues such as immigration reform and trade has become more difficult. The way Trump disparages global allies is deeply concerning for anyone who values the principles of international cooperation and diplomacy. Instead of fostering relationships that promote peace and mutual understanding, Trump's rhetoric has only deepened divisions and created mistrust, both within the U.S. and abroad. 3. The impact on global trade and foreign policy. Trump's embarrassing behavior is not confined to his rhetoric alone. His policies, especially on trade and foreign relations, have had a lasting impact on global dynamics. His unprovoked attacks on global trading partners, particularly those in the BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have disrupted international relations and hurt the U.S. economy. At one point, Trump threatened to impose 25% tariffs on countries such as Canada, Mexico, and members of the European Union, essentially crippling economic cooperation between these nations and the United States. This approach reflected Trump's fundamental misunderstanding of international trade and the interdependence of global economies. Countries like Canada and Mexico are not enemies to be bullied. They are allies with whom the U.S. shares a deep economic connection. Additionally, Trump's approach to the BRICS nations was equally flawed. His bombastic threats of tariffs against countries like Brazil and India only serve to isolate the U.S. from emerging global powers. Ironically, Trump's threats against Russia and China, two nations that he often admires, have been less aggressive, raising questions about his motivations and alliances. Ultimately, Trump's foreign policy decisions and his inability to act diplomatically have weakened the U.S. on the world stage. The damage done to long-standing trade agreements, alliances, and international relations will take years to repair, and some believe it may be irreparable. 4. The Kushner connection. Trump's ties to controversial figures. Trump's behavior has also been intertwined with the controversial actions of his family, particularly his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his father-in-law, Charles Kushner. Charles Kushner, a convicted felon, was pardoned by Trump in 2020, despite his long history of legal issues and corrupt activities. This move raised questions about the integrity of Trump's decisions and his commitment to upholding the law. Charles Kushner's criminal history is well documented. In 2004, he was convicted for illegal campaign contributions, tax evasion, and witness tampering. Most notoriously, he hired a prostitute to entrap his brother-in-law, filmed the encounter, and sent the tape to his sister. His conviction, which was one of the most high-profile white-collar crime cases at the time, raised alarm bells about the state of justice under Trump's leadership. Trump's decision to pardon Charles Kushner was a clear sign of his willingness to protect those in his inner circle, no matter the cost to the nation. This decision further tarnished Trump's image as a leader who values the rule of law. By pardoning Kushner, Trump sent a dangerous message that legal accountability was secondary to loyalty, undermining the trust of both the American people and the international community. 5. The MAGA connection in Canada, hypocrisy and division. One of the most curious aspects of Trump's relationship with Canada is the growing support for his Make America Great Again, MAGA, movement among conservative leaders in Canada. Figures like Pierre Poilievre, the leader of Canada's Conservative Party, have publicly expressed their admiration for Trump, even as he continues to attack their country and its people. In recent months, Trudeau's diplomatic efforts to engage with Trump have often been framed as an attempt to mitigate the damage caused by the MAGA movement. However, many Canadians have begun to see this as a sign of weakness, as Trump's behavior becomes increasingly erratic and hostile. The The constant back and forth between Trump's allies in Canada and the broader public sentiment about his actions highlights the ideological rift that exists not only in the US, but also in neighboring nations. As the MAGA movement continues to gain traction in Canada, it raises important questions about the future of US-Canada relations. While some conservative leaders continue to downplay Trump's attacks, others are starting to realize the potential long-term damage of aligning with a leader who consistently undermines global cooperation. 6. The global impact of Trump's words and actions. While Trump's behavior has primarily hurt the United States, the repercussions of his actions extend far beyond American borders. His lack of diplomacy has created a void in global leadership, with other nations stepping in to fill the gap left by the US. Whether it's China strengthening its influence in Africa, Russia manipulating foreign politics, or the European Union working to assert its values on the world stage, Trump's absence from key international discussions has allowed adversaries to gain ground. The global consequences of Trump's actions have yet to be fully realized, but his tenure as president has left a lasting scar on the world's perception of the US. While some may argue that his approach was a necessary shakeup to the international order, the broader reality is that his disregard for diplomacy and alliances has weakened America's standing on the global stage. Donald Trump's recent actions and words have once again shown that he is unfit to represent the United States on the world stage. His repeated insults and humiliating behavior towards allies like Canada, France, and Mexico demonstrate a disturbing pattern of disrespect and ignorance. From threatening to annex Canada to alienating key trade partners, Trump's actions have caused irreparable harm to U.S. foreign relations. As we look ahead to the future, it is clear that the road to rebuilding America's relationships with its allies will be long and difficult. While Trump may continue to make headlines for his provocative statements, his legacy on the world stage is one of embarrassment, division, and missed opportunities for global cooperation. The United States, once a beacon of leadership and diplomacy, has been left to pick up the pieces of a presidency that will be remembered for its damage to international relations. The question remains, will the world ever look at the United States with the same respect it once did?